Hello there, my name is Rodney Biddle, and I am giving a presentation on emergency radio planning. This is an overview of technology options, communications options, different radio types. This presentation is really intended for someone that's thinking about getting their ham radio license. This is going to explain some of the options besides ham radio and some of the capabilities. I've trimmed down this presentation a little bit, so we may not be running 45 minutes. I'm going to shoot for about 20 minutes. We'll see how it goes. All right. Emergency communications. Most people think of ham radio as being the best communications tool, but it depends on what your needs are. There are 3 levels of ham radio licenses that you can obtain. The first level is a tech level operator. That's your initial license. That's a good license. It gets you onto the 70 centimeter, 2 meter frequencies. You can talk typically Baofeng radios. People are familiar with the Baofeng radios. Those work on both the UHF and VHF 70 centimeter and 2 meter bands. They can talk for a couple of miles radio to radio, but if you are accessing repeaters in your area, you can talk as far as the repeater network extends. I live in Tampa myself, and I can talk down into the Keys, and I can talk all the way up into Jacksonville and into Panama City through the SARS repeater network that runs here in Florida. The second level of ham radio license is your general level operator license. That's the best license if you're looking for something for emergency communications. That opens up a wide number of HF bands. These are lower frequency bands that run starting from the 10 meter, 12 meter, 15, 17, 20, 30, 40, 60, 80, and 160 meter bands. The characteristic of these bands is that radio signals travel much further due to reflection through the ionosphere. So you can have an HF radio set up, you can transmit. You do not need a repeater to be able to get hundreds or thousands of miles. The third level is the amateur extra operator license, or I'm sorry, the advanced extra operator license. That's the best license. That's the most difficult to get, requires the highest level of testing, and is really not needed. You don't get that much more in the way of frequencies or bands. You don't get any additional bands that are significantly useful. The folks that go for that typically tend to be your instructors and tend to be your testers, and I fit into both of those categories. Okay, there are other radio mechanisms or methods that you can use. The most inexpensive and the simplest is the FRS radio. This is a UHF family radio service. There's no license needed. It's a very short range, 2 to 3 miles tops, limited power. It's a half watt on 7 channels and 2 watts on 15 channels. It has a fixed antenna that cannot be upgraded, so you cannot remove that antenna and put a better one on. And it's a handheld radio. The second level is a GMRS radio. That's a general mobile radio service. The license is needed for that. There is a test. There is a license needed, no test. That is a typo there. It's $70 for 10 years, and the license covers everyone that's within your family. It shares all the same channels that FRS uses. You have a better range because of 2 factors. You have higher power and you have replaceable antenna. Your range is going to be anywhere from 2 to 25 miles. Your greater power, on most channels, you have 7 channels, so you're still limited to half watt, and those are the shared channels with FRS. You have 7 channels that will run up to 5 watts. And those 7 frequencies or channels are shared with FRS, so you can talk to FRS folks. But because you're able to transmit at a higher power, you'll be able to reach out a little bit further than they can. So there are going to be people that can hear you and you cannot hear them. And then 8 channels allow you to transmit at a full 50 watts. 8 repeater channels that also broadcast at 50 watts. Now, when you get up into 50 watts, you're getting to either a repeater or you're getting into a mobile radio, not a handheld. Those are going to be able to communicate much further. Any type of radio system you get, I would recommend getting a high-powered one at some point if you're looking to use it for emergency communications. These GMRS radios have replaceable antennas. You can add a mag mount car antenna or a external antenna to your house, small tower antenna to extend the range. You can put an antenna 50 feet up in the air if you want outside your house. Repeaters are supported, so you might be able to hit a repeater. It turns around and retransmits your signal out. So if you're 5 miles from a repeater, it rebroadcasts your signal out another 5 miles. So you can communicate with someone 10 miles through a repeater where you might not have been able to communicate with them radio to radio. These are both handheld radios, which are limited to about 5 watts, and there are mobile radios, which go up to 50 watts. Citizens Band Radio, or CB radio, is a high-frequency AM radio. There is no license needed for this. Your range is going to be about 5 to 10 miles, depending on the quality of the external antenna. All the CB radios use external antennas. They are, again, AM radio and high-frequency range. The radios are larger. There are some that are handheld, but the majority of them are mobile radios. The antennas typically tend to be external. If you get a handheld with an antenna, that antenna is still going to have to be at least 4.5 to 5 feet long, which makes it awkward, especially if you're using it in a car. The FCC limits the power to CB to just 4 watts. AM, it will also, actually there's a caveat, if you get a CB radio that supports single sideband mode, and not all do, most do not, then you can transmit up to 12 watts. The CB radios are easily found in retailers. You can find them at Walmart, you can find them at truck stops, and some auto stores even carry them. And the last alternative radio system that I'm going to talk about is MERS. It's a VHF radio system. The frequencies or the channels came from business radio. They were reallocated several years ago. There's no license needed. Range is going to be about 5 miles tops. And that's going to be if you're using an external antenna. These radios do support an external antenna. 2 watts is the maximum power that you can get out of these radios. There are 5 specifically defined channels. These radios do work in the VHF frequency range, so you get a little bit better distance than you will with UHF. They are not found in retailers and they're not easily found. You have to usually go online and purchase these radios. Footnote, a lot of people are familiar with the Baofeng radios. Baofeng does sell a GMRS only radio, and they also sell a MERS only radio. The unique thing about those radios is they are FCC licensed for those frequencies. Okay, for all radio systems, what helps performance? Okay, in general, performance is going to be based on one of 3 factors: antenna and the quality of the antenna, power of the radio, and the frequencies used to communicate. For the antenna should be tuned. It needs to be a specific length for the frequency or frequency range that's being used. External antennas, or an antenna mounted outside, is the best type of antenna. A fixed or built-in antenna is going to be the worst. On power, naturally greater power works best. For hams, if you're looking to get your tech level license, I would not just settle with a Baofeng handheld radio. I would look to purchase a mobile radio. A mobile radio that supports at least 50 watts. Power is not the most critical factor, though. You can have a radio with power and a poor antenna, and it will not work well. So of the factors, I would say probably antenna is the most important. Power is going to be second most important. And then frequencies used to communicate. HF ham frequencies will travel the furthest. So you can communicate with someone at a greater distance without having to have some intermediary system like a repeater involved or an internet connection. You can communicate some systems via internet repeaters. UHF, VHF, this is what you get when you get your tech ham license. This is also used for GRMS, FRS, and also MERS. These bands are line of sight. So pretty much you don't get skip, you don't get a lot of bounce from these. Large obstacles like the curvature of the earth, large buildings, forests, trees, leaves, things like that will kill the distance quickly. The UHF, VHF frequencies that hams use work with repeaters. They work very well. I can communicate several hundred miles through the repeater networks that are located here in Florida. That means I can drive from the Keys up until the Panhandle and still be talking to the same people. Even though my signal would get weak and strong and so forth, I can still talk to the same people. Best communication range is going to be via ham radio using HF frequencies, which requires a general license. So of all of the radio systems, the absolute best is ham. Okay, these are a couple of photos that give you some ideas of what some of the handhelds look like. The photo on the left, this is at FRS and most GRMS radios. These are usually bubble pack radios. They are relatively low power, ranging from a half watt up to 5 watts. I do have some half watt only radios myself. These do have a fixed antenna. That stubby antenna does not come off. And the poor antenna design cuts down on the distance. Some GMRS and all MERS radios, let me correct that. Some MERS radios and handheld radios have a replaceable antenna like the one on the right. The picture on the right is a Baofeng. It is actually a Baofeng GMRS V1 radio. That radio does allow you to remove the antenna that comes with the radio. In fact, when the radio ships, the antenna is not connected to the radio. You can replace it. In this case, this is a Nagoya long whip for better transmission and reception. In fact, you can even put an antenna outside on a tall pole. In my camper, which I use as a remote ham shack, I can attach a mobile radio to my outside antenna, which goes up 25 feet. Or you can put a mag mount antenna on the car. Power of the radio. Handheld radios are usually limited to about 5 watts of power. And the reason is, would you want to broadcast high power inches from your head? You typically don't want to. So they're limited to 5 watts. There are some Baofengs coming out that I think are 8 or 10 or even 15 watts, but that reaches into the area of why do you want to go that high with something that's right beside your head. Mobile radios range in power usually from about 25 watts up to 50 watts. The antenna is mounted outside the vehicle, so you do not have it next to your head. Some mobile radios do go higher in power output. So I actually have a ICOM radio that goes up to 100 watts, and it is a mobile radio. Now, note on here, the FCC limits CB radios to only 4 watts. 12 watts if you're using single sideband. Okay, if you're going to make a jump into ham radio, you're going to have to be taking a test. If you're going to be studying for your test, there are a lot of resources. The 2 best books I would recommend are the Gordon West 2018 to 2022 Tech Class book. It's about $20 on Amazon. I think it's about $22 or $23 actually. It's a very good study guide. It focuses on the questions and the answers. It does not go in deep on topics or theory. You turn a page, there's your question, there's an explanation of the answer. It's a short explanation. It may not be long enough for some people, but it is a good focused study book. The ARRL puts out a ham radio license manual. It's about $33 on Amazon. It contains all of the questions and the answers. It does have an answer key in it, and it goes very in depth in discussions. It goes into theory. It is a more in-depth study guide. It doesn't focus as much on the questions and answers. And when I say that, I mean you don't go to a particular page and there's a question, there's the answer, and there's an explanation. And what it does is it goes through the theory and different topics, and the questions and answers are in there. The answers are in there. It's more of a college-type study book. The footnote on the test, when you do take the test, you can pick up from any of these sources the exact questions and the exact answers. The test, when you get the test answers are not in the same order that they are in the book, but the verbiage, exactly what they say is exactly the same. So they don't pull any tricks, they don't change any words in the study guides and the tests. The pool, this is incorrect on here. The pool is 423 questions. Your test is 35 questions. So those 35 questions are pulled from that pool of 423 questions. And if you fail the test and decide to retake it, you're going to get a different test with a different set of questions on it. So don't think that you're going to walk in, get a test, fail it, and then turn around and retake the same test. They'll change it up on you. Class instruction or mentorship. Online practice tests, that's where the full piece came from. You can go online. There are a number of websites where you can take practice tests online. Some of them have a fee, some of them are free. I subscribed to one of the better sites. I think it was Ham Study Guide, and it was an excellent small fee, not much. I think about $10 or $15. The class instruction or mentorship is the third way of learning, and that's when you have an in-person instructor to work with for guidance and clarification. Okay, and I've already said this, 35 questions on the test from a pool of 423. Tests are mostly taken in person through the ARRL. They're the largest testing organization. They do allow for remote testing now if the club can support it. All of the tests are provided by the clubs. Doing a remote test session is difficult for a club. Our club tried to figure it out and decided not to. Our last test session was just past Saturday, which is in June. It was the first June of 2020 because of the COVID shutdown. Most of the groups stopped testing. We had 23 people come to our test session. We usually have 3 to 4 people. So there are a lot of people out there wanting to get caught up and wanting to get their license. Test cost is $15 from the ARRL. Some groups give it for free. Laurel VEC does not charge anything. On this list here, these are 3 of the VECs that provide testing. You can go to these websites. I'll provide information on this page where you came to this video with the links to this presentation and the links to where you can go look up tests. Okay, ham radio basic skills. Useful skills, basic understanding of electricity, DC power, batteries, voltage, amps, wattage. How to use a voltmeter, how to take a voltage reading or a continuity or amperage. Math, there are formulas on the test. Math for power and frequency calculations. So you will have a relatively simple algebra math on the test. Understanding of some electronic components. What's a resistor, what's a capacitor, what's a diode, what did they do, where do they come into play? Now, you're not going to have extensive knowledge of this. They're just going to be testing you on some of the basics. So don't think that you're going to have an engineering or electronics degree. Basic electronic antenna concepts and wiring up antennas. Okay, back the books. Some of the items that you may want to purchase. This is a link. Again, you'll be able to find this video after. Look at the details for this posting, and you'll be able to find these links. Amazon.com, this is a link to it. Baofeng BF8 HP or UV82 HP radio is a good starter radio. It's very inexpensive. They're $63. Yes, you can purchase Baofeng for about $24. Baofeng Tech is a US company. If you have a warranty problem, you'll be able to get the radio swapped out within about a week. A lot of the other places, if you have a warranty problem, you have to ship the radio to China, which costs as much or more than the radio itself. So basically, if you purchase radio elsewhere, it's a throwaway. Baofeng radio programming cable. This is important. Get the proper cable. A lot of clone cables out there, these cables use a chip in them, and a lot of clone cables use a clone chip. And those chips are not correct. They don't have the right version on them, and the Windows software rejects them. You have to go through a big hassle of having to track down the right driver and upload the right driver that works with that cable. And the first time I did it, it took me 2 or 3 days to get it right, and it's not worth it for saving $5 or $10. And then chirp programming software or something similar. If you're using a Baofeng radio to get started with, Chirp works with the Baofeng radios and it's free. It does support both of those particular models up there. If you get some oddball models, they may not be listed in the Chirp software, but the Chirp usually still works with them. Okay, Baofeng two-way handheld radios. How can I legally use a radio without a license? Okay, a lot of people purchase these radios, toss them in a box, don't worry about getting their ham radio license. And they think that they can just pop it out and use it. you cannot legally use a Baofeng radio, the popular radios that you pick up, without a license. That means you cannot use it if you program it on MERS or FRS, MRS frequencies. You cannot use it, not legally. If you cause interference, someone will, let me rephrase that. If you cause interference and you're in a congested area where there's another ham out there, they may track you down and report you to the FCC, and the FCC's fines start off at about $10,000. So just be aware of it. If you do want to use GMRS or MERS and you want a Baofeng, order the right Baofeng radio. There are some that are properly licensed for those frequencies. The only exception to not being able to legally use these radios is if there's an emergency where life or property are at risk. So if you're out in the woods hiking, something like that, and something happens, you're out of cell signal range, you need help, you need ambulance or fire or something, you can use that radio, hit a repeater, and reach someone and call for help. Okay, another radio option is Zello. Now, Zello is not actually a handheld radio. This is an application. It's a license-free application that you can turn your Android phone, iPhone, or your computer into an internet-based radio. You can go to Zello.com to install it, or you can find the app in your Android Play Store or in your Apple App Store. This is a great tool for communicating with groups, friends, and family. Since no license is needed, everyone can install it, everyone can use it. You can create private channels and talk one-on-one or in a group. We have a Zello channel called Preham, which our intention is, as we're developing our classes, if we want our non-hams that are studying the tech class to be able to just chime in and ask one of the instructors or ask another student something, then they can use their phone and they can use the Zello app. It's a great as an instructional tool. It's also a very good prepping tool. The question is, do you need a ham radio? Maybe you don't. In a lot of areas during a disaster, cell phones may still operate if the networks remain up. During power outages, backup power on the cell tower usually lasts about 4 hours or less. So remember a couple points though. During Hurricane Maria, cell service was out for weeks. That's also Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Dorian. Most hurricanes, if they come through, they can devastate. During Hurricane Harvey, though, footnote, about 90 to 95% of the cell towers remained up and operational the entire time. That was the hurricane that went through, I think it was in 2018, through Texas. Best non-licensed option for radio communications is CB radio. This offers a radio-to-radio communication. Many truckers still use them. You can install a tower or antenna high that can get you up to maybe 15, maybe even 20-mile range, depending on where you're at. Footnote on that, during Hurricane Michael, a lot of truckers were going into the devastated area and they were using their CBs to get directions while they were within the area. Cell towers were out for weeks where Michael hit. And Zello is also good if you're looking to just chat without a license during non-crisis events. There are channels that are worldwide band channels. So last night I was doing something and I heard people talking, chiming in from Australia, halfway around the world, just chit-chatting. So I had to turn it off for what I was doing, but sometimes I leave it on. Sometimes I've woken up at night and hear somebody clear as if they were in my room. It really freaked me out. Okay, and then so you have to ask yourself, would CB, GRMS, FRS, or MERS work for you? The other factor is if you're just looking to communicate short range, you want to be able to reach your kids if they go out in the neighborhood after something happens, you can call them back. GRMS or MERS would work probably pretty good for that. Depends on how far they go. Okay, here are some links. Again, this video presentation, this PowerPoint will be available to download later. And so here are some useful links that we've covered through the presentation. Okay, and it looks like I was able to trim down the time on this. I thank everyone for joining in. Please add some comments down below. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.